Good morning. Welcome to today's intelligence briefing. In the next 15 minutes or so, we will look at a region where a single tweet almost ignited a broader international conflict.
Good morning to you. It is a privilege to present this analysis.
We're also tracking a ticking political clock that threatens an entire developing democracy. And we'll look at a situation where the ground beneath it all is literally tearing a continent in half.
We have a lot of ground to cover, and we are operating with a mandate for absolute clarity today. We will examine the facts exactly as they stand on the ground.
Right. Without speculation, without taking sides, and certainly without generating undue alarm.
Exactly. We maintain strict neutrality.
So for the official record, today's intelligence metadata is as follows. The official title of this deep dive is Al-Shabaab, Elections and Instability, Horn of Africa Under Pressure.
And the region under examination is East Africa. The date of this report is 4 May 2026.
I should also mention that this deep dive is sponsored by ProWave AI, and it is generated by Stylo News, the premier AI-powered news application.
Yes, and before we proceed to the regional developments, it's important to provide you with the operational context of the tools we are utilizing.
Right.
The Stylo News application is the consumer iteration of the Stylo Intel Ops software. That enterprise software is specifically designed to support massive scale operations.
We're talking across government, military, and international business sectors, which means this platform provides you with unique, unprecedented access to a strategic tool originally engineered for global decision makers.
Precisely. The mission of our deep dive today is straightforward. We will analyze the primary patterns of events that have unfolded over the past 2 weeks.
And we will assess their impacts at the local, national, and international levels. Furthermore, we'll identify the perspectives of key decision makers to propose possible courses of action.
We will examine 4 primary vectors today. First, the immediate battlefield conditions in south-central Somalia. Second, the underlying fragility of the Somali state apparatus.
Third, the broader regional diplomatic and maritime security environment. And finally, we'll look at the intersection of infrastructure, economics, and environmental pressures across East Africa.
Let's begin with the first vector.
Okay, let's unpack this, beginning with the immediate security situation. We are looking at the counteroffensive against Al-Shabaab in south-central Somalia.
The data indicates that Al-Shabaab maintains a defined geographic footprint. Their operations are primarily concentrated in Lower Shabelle, Middle Shabelle Bay, and Hiiraan.
Right, and their central headquarters is situated in Jilib. But I am looking at this intelligence regarding the sheer volume of international force applied here.
It's substantial.
I mean, for example, the United States Africa Command recently executed its 53rd airstrike of 2026. This was targeting militants about 80 miles northwest of Kismayo.
Yes.
If we have been hitting them this consistently from the air, why is their central headquarters in Jilib still fully operational? What are we missing here?
Well, that is the fundamental challenge of asymmetrical warfare. Al-Shabaab does not operate like a traditional uniformed military that you can just, bomb into submission.
Right.
Their resilience is largely due to their intelligence and internal security wing, known as the Amniyat. The Amniyat functions like a shadow government embedded directly within the civilian population.
I see.
They run sophisticated extortion rings, taxing local businesses to fund their operations. So while airstrikes degrade their physical infrastructure and training camps, rooting out the Amniyat requires intense ground combat.
And a level of local intelligence that airstrikes simply cannot replace, which explains the recent surge in ground operations.
Correct.
Over the past 2 weeks, we have observed significant operations by the Somali National Army, supported by international partners. They reported the deaths of 33 militants in Middle Shabelle and 27 militants in the Juba regions.
We also have reporting on a sustained 72-hour operation in the Bulo Abdallah area of Lower Shabelle. That specific engagement eliminated 22 militants,
including a key field commander, Abdirahman Jiri. Now, why is neutralizing a single commander like Jiri tactically significant to the wider network?
Because commanders like Jiri represent institutional memory and logistical capability. They are the individuals who understand the smuggling routes.
They hold the knowledge.
Exactly. They know how to source explosive materials, and they hold the network of local informants together. When you remove a node like that, you temporarily paralyze that specific regional cell.
They essentially have to pause operations to promote a replacement and rebuild those localized networks.
Yes, and when we evaluate the decision-maker perspectives on these military developments, two distinct viewpoints emerge.
Right, the Somali Defense Ministry views these offensive ground operations as a critical prerequisite to stabilizing liberated areas. It's about restoring basic governance.
From the American perspective, U.S. Africa Command, which is currently undertaking a major expansion of its Manda Bay facility across the border in Kenya, well, they remain focused on a broader strategic mandate.
They are aiming to degrade militant capabilities, to prevent the export of international terrorism, and to secure the coastal corridors.
When we monitor social media sentiment across the region, however, the public response is highly complex.
It's distinctly split, isn't it?
It is. There is a broad, measurable optimism online regarding these tangible battlefield gains. Citizens are relieved to see insurgents pushed out of key villages.
Yet this optimism is heavily tempered by a profound public alarm over the political fragmentation currently unfolding in the capital, Mogadishu.
Right.
To clarify the mechanism of this conflict for you, think of the military sweeping out Al-Shabaab like a snowplow clearing a treacherous highway. The soldiers in the airstrikes act as the plow, pushing the immediate threat off the road.
A fitting analogy.
But local governance, economic investment, and political stability, those are the salt trucks following right behind.
Yeah.
If the politicians in Mogadishu are fighting amongst themselves and the salt truck never comes, well, the ice just freezes over again the second the military drives away.
What's fascinating here is how the adversary reacts to this pressure. Looking forward, our assessment of the most likely course of action is that sustained counterterrorism pressure will continue to degrade Al-Shabaab's open networks in the short term.
But they'll likely adapt, won't they?
They will. Intelligence indicates they are actively undergoing internal restructuring. We anticipate they will attempt to regenerate their attack capacity and plot retaliatory strikes.
Specifically targeting U.S. or Kenyan-linked facilities in the region.
Yes, to demonstrate continued operational relevance despite these heavy battlefield losses.
With Somalia's internal security acting as that struggling snowplow, we must pivot our focus to the failing salt truck, the political deadlock.
Yes, the underlying fragility of the state.
This brings us to the impending constitutional crisis in Somalia. The critical date to mark on your calendars is the May 15 mandate deadline.
To understand why May 15 is so volatile, you have to understand the mechanics of the transition currently being attempted. Historically, power in Somalia has not been decided by individual citizens at a ballot box.
It's been negotiated by a deeply entrenched system of powerful clan elders.
Correct. But now, Somalia is attempting to shift toward its first direct one-person, one-vote elections. The National Electoral Commission is actively training election staff in Afgui to facilitate this massive undertaking.
But trying to flip a decades-old clan system to a Western-style universal suffrage model overnight? Well, that threatens to disenfranchise incredibly powerful, heavily armed political groups.
It introduces severe systemic stress. President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed is currently prioritizing continued external security support to manage the stress.
Right, he is actively seeking the retention of foreign basing and an extension of ATMIS.
For context, ATMIS is the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia. It is a multidimensional peacekeeping force authorized by the African Union and mandated by the UN Security Council.
And President Mohammed's reliance on ATMIS signals that the federal government does not yet trust its own internal security architecture to hold the country together during this electoral shift.
Conversely, we observe stark warnings from clan elders and prominent opposition figures, including former President Sharif Sheikh Ahmed.
They are raising the alarm regarding an elite political deadlock, urging political leaders to remain physically present in Mogadishu.
Yes. They argue that if leaders abandon the capital for regional strongholds, it will trigger armed clashes between rival security factions the very moment that May 15 deadline expires without a consensus.
Monitoring the digital landscape, the sentiment reflects deep public unease. Citizens see exactly what is happening.
They do. They are expressing fear online that this political infighting in Mogadishu is actively distracting the government and the military from the counterinsurgency campaign.
Political uncertainty in Somalia is not merely a governance issue. It is a direct security variable. Any reduction in the cohesion of the Somali National Army provides immediate, exploitable space for insurgent forces.
So what does this all mean? Presenting the facts objectively, we see two primary courses of action moving forward.
The first path is a negotiated political consensus reached before May 15. This scenario preserves state cohesion, allows the electoral transition to proceed cautiously, and maintains unified military pressure on Al-Shabaab.
The second, more concerning path is a fractured electoral process resulting from a failure to reach consensus. This would likely degrade the loyalty and availability of federal forces.
Meaning officers and units might align with their respective clan affiliations rather than the central government.
Exactly, creating localized security vacuums in south-central Somalia, vacuums that al-Shabaab is perfectly positioned to exploit.
With Somalia's internal security stretched so thin by this political deadlock, it is creating a dangerous vacuum. And here's where it gets really interesting as we observe neighboring countries and international players aggressively stepping into that void.
The regional diplomatic environment is certainly heating up.
Over the past 2 weeks, we have tracked highly unusual public statements from Uganda's Chief of Defense Forces, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba.
The general's communications on social media were, by diplomatic standards, unprecedented.
To say the least.
He publicly demanded $1 billion and a, quote, most beautiful woman from Turkey as compensation for Uganda's nearly two-decade military role in stabilizing Somalia.
He further threatened to sever diplomatic ties and close the Turkish embassy in Kampala within 30 days if these demands were unmet.
In addition to the demands directed at Turkey, he issued statements threatening military action against Iran while simultaneously expressing strong solidarity with Israel.
You might be wondering how a single general demanding $1 billion and a bride on a social media platform actually affects global security.
It sounds absurd at first glance.
But when that general commands the Ugandan military, which forms the absolute backbone of that ATMIS peacekeeping force we just discussed, a rogue statement, suddenly becomes a massive international security crisis.
Absolutely. If Uganda were to suddenly pull its troops out of Somalia due to a diplomatic spat, the Somali government could collapse in a matter of weeks.
Exactly. Which is why President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, who is also the general's father, is cautiously but deliberately distancing his administration from these remarks.
The priority for Kampala is to preserve its international alliances and avoid diplomatic isolation. They recognize that their military role in Somalia is a cornerstone of their regional leverage.
To compound this regional complexity, Israel has recently appointed a non-resident ambassador to Somaliland, effectively recognizing its independence from Somalia.
Israel's perspective is strategically driven. They are seeking to establish a secure foothold and expand their maritime influence in the Horn of Africa, particularly near the critical Red Sea shipping lanes.
However, this has provoked immediate and strong condemnation from the Somali federal government, the African Union, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
They strictly adhere to the principle of sovereign borders. They warn that unilateral recognitions could further destabilize an already fragile region by encouraging other separatist movements.
And this diplomatic friction is occurring against a backdrop of escalating maritime insecurity. On April 21st, an oil tanker was hijacked approximately 90 kilometers northeast of Mogadishu, Somalia.
The unauthorized individuals maneuvered the vessel 77 nautical miles south, deep into Somali territorial waters.
How exactly does piracy suddenly resurge like this?
Well, piracy is a direct symptom of the terrestrial governance vacuum we discussed earlier. When coastal regions lack robust law enforcement and economic opportunity, maritime crime becomes a highly lucrative alternative.
Following this tanker hijacking, the British Maritime Security Agency, UKMTO, alongside the European Union, are strongly advocating for sustained multinational naval patrols
to protect the Gulf of Aden, which remains a vital artery for global trade.
The social media sentiment surrounding these diplomatic shocks is highly polarized. On the issue of Somaliland, African audiences exhibit strong support for the African Union's mediation and defense of Somalia's territorial integrity.
Regarding the Ugandan general's remarks, Turkish social media users view the demands as highly provocative and disrespectful.
Meanwhile, Iranian online supporters have largely dismissed the threats of military action as unserious bluster.
This raises an important question regarding the stability of international peacekeeping and maritime commerce over the coming months.
Based on the intelligence, what is the most likely course of action diplomatically?
A quiet de-escalation by Uganda to maintain its crucial security partnerships. On the maritime front, we assess that international naval forces will significantly escalate joint patrols in the Gulf of Aden over the next 6 months to deter further piracy.
Amidst all this political and diplomatic turbulence, there are fundamental socioeconomic realities pulling the region in drastically opposite directions. We turn to our fourth segment, examining the broader infrastructure, economic, and environmental landscape.
And we must first relay a grave warning issued by the United Nations.
Yes, the UN report states that a severe famine risk currently threatens millions in Somalia.
This is the result of escalating global food insecurity, driven by a vicious cycle of conflict, severe climate shocks including unprecedented droughts followed by flash floods, and drastically reduced international humanitarian funding.
The situation demands immediate, coordinated global attention to prevent mass starvation.
In stark contrast to the humanitarian crisis in Somalia, neighboring Kenya is rapidly advancing its geopolitical and economic standing through technology and green infrastructure.
Kenya is significantly expanding its geothermal energy production at the Hell's Gate National Park and Olkaria fields.
To understand the importance of this, you have to look at the physics and economics of geothermal energy. Unlike solar or wind, which are intermittent, geothermal provides continuous, reliable baseload power drawn from the heat of the earth.
By tapping into this, Kenya is securing incredibly stable, sustainable, and cheap energy for its industrial base.
And cheap, reliable energy is exactly what is required to power the massive data centers needed for our next topic, artificial intelligence.
Kenya is actively positioning itself as a leader in global AI adoption. Kenya's Special Envoy for Technology, Philip Tigo, recently emphasized the country's high AI usage rates and the strategic imperative to build sovereign digital infrastructure.
By pairing cheap geothermal energy with aggressive AI policies, Kenya is setting itself up as the technological anchor of the continent.
We must also note a recent incident involving information integrity in Kenya. Misinformation circulated widely online, featuring a fabricated graphic.
This graphic falsely attributed harsh anti-African Union remarks to Kenyan President William Ruto.
Fact-checking organizations, such as Africa Check, swiftly debunked the quote. They clarified that President Ruto actually advocates for institutional reforms within the AU, not its disparagement.
Lastly, we turn to regional infrastructure and sports diplomacy. Preparations for the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations, or AFCON, are facing hurdles.
While Tanzania is progressing on schedule with stadium builds, Kenya and Uganda are experiencing significant infrastructural delays.
The perspective of the Confederation of African Football Chairman, Patrice Motsepe, is notable here. He maintains public confidence in the East African host nation's ability to deliver the tournament, emphasizing continental pride.
However, he is a pragmatist. He is actively ensuring contingency plans are in place, considering South Africa or Rwanda as alternative hosts should the delays persist.
When we evaluate the courses of action in this socioeconomic sector, the paths forward are highly divergent.
For Somalia, the requirement is an immediate, massive surge in international humanitarian funding and logistical support. The alternative is a catastrophic famine.
For Kenya, the continued investment in green energy and digital AI infrastructure strongly positions the nation to serve as the economic and technological engine for the entire East African region, provided they can effectively manage their infrastructural commitments.
That concludes the formal presentation of today's intelligence assessment. Before we sign off, we want to explain a bit more about the technology making this brief possible.
Yes, as we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, Stylo News is a mobile and computer application that brings this exact level of intelligence gathering directly to you.
It allows individuals to download and fully customize their own personal intelligence-style briefs. It draws data from hundreds of traditional news sources, as well as the Platform X.
We highly encourage you to take control of your daily information flow. You can subscribe and get AI-powered news completely on demand by visiting www.stylonews.com.
And with that, I believe we can officially drop the 1960s news anchor personas. It is quite a relief to loosen the metaphorical tie and just, drop the broadcast voice.
It really is.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really hope this format helped clarify the mechanisms behind a very complex, fast-moving region.
It is always a pleasure. It's a lot of heavy information to process, but taking the time to break down the how and why behind the headlines makes it much easier to digest.
Absolutely. And we want to hear from you too. Please feel free to request topics for future deep dives, and don't forget to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms.
We really covered a massive amount of ground today. I mean, military offensives, political deadlines, wild diplomatic tweets, and shifting economies.
It's a region totally defined by intense human friction.
It really is. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, there is something happening beneath all of these human conflicts that completely dwarfs them.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, While leaders are arguing over borders, deploying troops, and recognizing breakaway states, the Earth itself is actively redrawing the map of East Africa.
Wait, you mean the physical map? Like the actual geography?
Literally. The East African Rift System is currently splitting the African continent into two completely separate tectonic plates, the Somali plate and the Nubian plate.
You're kidding.
No, they are moving apart at a rate of about 6 to 7 millimeters a year.
6 to 7 millimeters. I mean, that doesn't sound like much to us, but in geological terms, that is practically a sprint.
Exactly. Geological surveys confirm that in about 5 to 10 million years, a brand new ocean will form right through the middle of the Horn of Africa.
Oh, wow.
It will completely separate the landmass where all of these current political border disputes are taking place.
That is just incredible to think about. So all these fierce battles over territory, the political posturing in Mogadishu, the lines drawn on paper by diplomats, eventually the Earth is just going to open up and fill those borders with seawater.
Yep.
It is a profoundly humbling reminder that human geopolitics are incredibly temporary when placed against the vast scale of geologic time. You can fight over the land all you want, but the land ultimately decides where it's going.
Well said.
Until next time, thanks for listening.
Mm.